Hi, welcome to the session. Today we're going to be looking at the Black Panther theme by Ludwig Göransson and how to recreate that in Logic Pro X. The Black Panther theme is a great combination of African instruments with orchestral instruments, so let's have a look. So this is the Logic project for Black Panther. It's at 117 BPM throughout the entire cue, and here's how it sounds. So that's a cue right there. It's a section of the main cue. The other part has sort of a vocal section, so we didn't go into recreating the first bit. So let's start with the African kit. Now, I use the World Instrument African kit, obviously. This is kind of the pattern that the first bit's playing. Pretty straightforward. And this is the second bit. So it's kind of like a bunch of drummers. And it's purposefully a bit loose because that's how it feels in the original as well. It's kind of like a bunch of drummers actually playing. This is the third section. So together they sound like this. And all these tracks are being sent, as you can see, they're being sent to bus 8, which is an aux, and this is bus 8, and there's a channel EQ happening. I've taken up all the low end, yeah, a bit of the sort of high mids and the high frequencies as well. Let's just have a listen to them, without and with. This is without, a little bit bright. So I wanted a bit of that lo-fi kind of sound, a bit more sort of real tribal recording kind of feel, and this is kind of what I came up with. And also each individual track is being sent to a bus, which is in this case bus 1. And bus 1 is a space designer, and in this case it's a hall, soft hall, 100% wet because of the send, and you get a bit of that difference of the kind of space, the feeling of space. And I didn't send the bus 1 on the send because on the bus 8, because I wanted to control the level of sends. On the level of send on this little fella here, it's higher. And so these guys are playing some extra tracks and they look like this. So together they add a little more sort of chaos to it. And this is sort of like little drum solo thing happening. Still an African kit, but I pitch shifted it slightly, 2 semitones max, because I wanted it to sound a bit dinkier, a bit higher pitched, as opposed to without the pitch shifter. Yeah, I just wanted a bit slightly higher pitched, and the timing is based on drums. There we go. It's a nice little group going there. Now let's get into this section here, which is the strings of bloom. Very straightforward. It's just an octave on C. And I use EXS strings 2 under pop strings, EXS strings 2, because it's got the right texture about it. And I send it to another bus, not the same bus as the other one. I needed something bigger and smoother, so a large hall, which is 0.27 seconds smooth hall. And that's where I sent most of the orchestra to. And in this case, if you open up the automation, you can see a sort of like a little curve going up from 0. That's how it blooms into the section. And that's the string section. Now, there is a little sort of like roll into it as well. I tried a different approach because I couldn't play the percussion bit for nuts. And it's basically just a single note with an ARP. So I like to program ARPs. And when you turn up the ARP, I go to 1/16 triplet. I use the grid instead of live, and I drew my own pattern. It's not a fancy pattern. Yeah, so you get that sort of build up. And then we go to the big section now. There's an orchestral kit that I love using. It's under orchestral percussion, orchestral kit. It's got nice booms and stuff. In this case, we wanted that boom sending to bus 2 as well. And it wasn't big enough though. It's just one. And I wanted something to go with it. And in EXS24, you go to Textures, FX, Trailer FX, and you got some pretty big sort of like hits. Just to give it that impact. Yeah, and I think it really does give it some impact. So that covers the low end. This covers sort of like the highish end of it. And let's get to the fun bits, which is the brass. Now, this track here. It's basically under orchestral brass, trumpet staccato, sent to bus 2 as well. And you know, it's nice and staccato-y. And this is just a duplicate track of it, so it's playing the octave. And you can notice that some of it is not really in time. You know, I left it like that. I wanted it to be slightly messier for this track. And I think that feeling kind of works for this track. Now, on this other section, there is under orchestral brass, French horns legato. It's another rhythmic pattern, but I didn't use a staccato because I wanted this section to be a bit more muted. So, you know, it doesn't sound the most realistic, but I think when you put them together, they start sounding like sort of a bit more human. And, you know, like, they're not perfectly quantized, you can see here, and they kind of, you know, have a nicer organic feel. Now, there's another long line, sort of horn line, and it's under orchestral brass, legato, same thing as this one, but it's really playing a legato line, and it goes like that. Sort of setting the bass for the chord, like this. So that's the horn section, and I think it's kind of rich enough, and now we're working with the strings. Now, the voices. So under orchestral, choir, classical ensemble plus, it sounds like this. Not exactly the most realistic sounding sample, but it'll have to do. And I paired it with another one called under orchestral choir, church choir. And, you know, I EQ'd it like crazy because I wanted to get that high-end air about it. And I think it really worked. I took out all the low end. So it sounds like this. And when you pair it together, it gets bigger. And that air is really important because it needs to rise above the horns. And I think it kind of works. I really like the reverb that we picked for this one, which is once again a smooth vocal hall. And yeah, that's kind of it really. That's it for the first section. And the second repetition of it, I added some EXS strings too. So almost the same pattern except that the notes are different. And of course, the percussion goes underneath throughout the entire song. So it's just subtly, you know, giving that African feel underneath the orchestra. Now, this is sort of like the B section. So, you know, the main lines are this. And you can see they're all called trumpets legato because that's where the main melody lies. I just copied the MIDI over. And repeated it on EXS strings too. It's this really big melody and it's octaved with the... Yeah, the whole melody goes like that. And underneath that, we have this percussion going. And this is under the orchestral kit as well. I've just copied repeatedly different kits. Yep, it's just the hits. Now this is sort of like slightly rhythmic. And this one is sort of the roll, you know, the one with the ARP. Yep, so it's the same thing. And then we have the trailer hit as well. So all the hits are still the same, like these two are from the same as the start. Now these extra bits and this rolls. And then we have the legato basses. Now this is a there we go, under strings, orchestral strings, basses legato. It's a really straightforward long line. And then we have the fun sort of like staccato bits. Right, so it goes kind of like that. And then we have this nice little trombone line that's underneath. Oh, this is interesting. I'm supposed to pick a trombone. Yeah. So it's sort of like a counter melody. Yep. And then we get to this section with the trumpets. And you can see some muted notes, and sometimes it's sort of like me trying to figure out which notes are actually in the being played and which are not. So I sometimes just mute them in case I want to remember where they are. And then we come to this section, sort of like the end of the phrase, where there's automation. Very simple automation, straight line. It's a French horn legatos under orchestral brass. Same thing, bus 2. And then same thing with EXS strings 2. I just copied the track over. You can use this button here, new track with duplicate settings, to get the same as this track, except that I want to be able to automate just this track. No, that's it. Yep. And that's the ending side of the orchestra. But something else comes in, and that is this interesting sort of bass line. It's like a rhythmic type of bass. So it's a bit like a bass, a bit like a percussion. And it's under ES2. I use a sine bass, like sort of very subby, deep kind of bass. And I mucked around with the ADSR a little bit and compressed it because it was like all over the place. I used a vintage opto and with a limiter, and this is how it sounds with the percussion. And you can feel it when it drops off. And you might be wondering what this aux track is. Now, this aux track, I'm going to bring a mixer in. The aux track is, let me bring the other mixer in. The aux track is this track, the bus 8, which I'm sending this African percussion towards. And you can just control click it and do create track, and it will create this aux track in your arrange window. And if you open automation, you can see that the aux track is actually automated. So you can automate the entire African instrument. So you can see it sort of goes up right here, and when the orchestra comes in, it sort of comes down, and right at the end sort of creeps back up again. And that's kind of it for this track. I hope you learned something useful today, like how to make your orchestral arrangement sound more organic. If you like, you can download the project at the link below, and if you like this video, please subscribe for more. See ya!